2016 for the Los Angeles Rams, you could really throw it in the bucket of being a disastrous season. Beyond just a lost season, just beyond a wasted season, but a disastrous season. You're talking about a team where the offensive line was terrible, Todd Gurley regressed massively, and worst of all, Jeff Fisher, because that's what Jeff Fisher does with young quarterbacks, horribly botched his handling of Jared Goff, didn't play him for almost half the year, and then when he did play him, the circumstance and situation that he was in was so bad that Goff looked terrible. He looked like an instant bust. Instant bust. He looked god-awful. And thankfully, mercifully, for the Rams organization, they made the decision in that 2016 season to send Jeff Fisher packing. I mean, they had no other choice. You're talking about your first year back in Los Angeles after over 2 decades away in St. Louis. You come back, and that's what you put out on the football field. It's not even the 7-9 crew at this point in time. It was terrible. It was god-awful. And then again, to think about that you had your previous number 1 pick, Todd Gurley. He looked so bad in 2016. Jared Goff looked god-awful. That offensive line couldn't block anybody. They had no weapons outside. It was time for a change, and a significant change and departure from the way things have been done in recent years, because clearly it wasn't good enough. You couldn't go into 2017, your second season, in the second biggest market in the country, and trot out there what you did the year before. So the Rams went out there and made a bold move, and it was a bold move to hire a 30-year-old offensive coordinator from the Washington Redskins, Sean McVay, to be their next head football coach. I mean, this was a significant departure from Jeff Fisher, where Jeff Fisher was a former NFL player who had coached for decades in the league, had previous success at certain times as a head coach in Tennessee. Now here's Sean McVay. He's going to be the youngest head coach in NFL history. I mean, that's a big departure, a massive departure. And it's easy to look back at the way the season played out and be like, oh, you know, it was genius, it was great. It was risky. It was incredibly risky. But honestly, the Rams didn't have any other choice, it felt like, other than to take that risk. They went out there, though, once they brought in the new offensive-minded head coach in Sean McVay, they brought in an experienced defensive mind like Wade Phillips, who, you know, head coach is one thing, but when it comes to defensive coordinators, Wade Phillips is on a similar plane in terms of Dick LeBeau, Buddy Ryan, names like that in terms of the truly great defensive minds, the truly great defensive coordinators in NFL history. You know, when Wade Phillips goes there, whether it's immediately or shortly after, those defenses are going to do well. They're going to do really, really well. They are going to be forces to be reckoned with. That's been Wade Phillips' track record throughout his coaching career, specifically when he's allowed to be a defensive coordinator and just focus on the defensive side of the ball. So you bring him in. You've got the young head coach, the old, experienced defensive coordinator with no real aspirations to become a head coach. Then Les Snead, the general manager, goes out in free agency and signs Andrew Whitworth, addressing that offensive line. Brings in somebody like Robert Woods, helping to, you know, beef up the skill players around your young quarterback, Jared Goff. Goes and gets a veteran pass rusher for that new 3-4 system like Connor Barwin. Then you get the Sammy Watkins trade. Again, trying to help out that young guy, because ultimately, bottom line is that if Jared Goff didn't show anything in 2017, if Jared Goff had continued to look like a bust, like he did in 2016, this organization was screwed for several years to come. So you had to go as much in as you possibly could to help the young kid out. That's what good organizations should do. But as you're getting ready for the season, even with the moves being made, you know, bringing in Whitworth and Woods, signing Sammy Watkins, or trading for Sammy Watkins, signing Connor Barwin in free agency, then you get the Aaron Donald holdout. And you could a strong argument, a very, very strong argument, an incredibly hulky argument, that Aaron Donald is the best defensive player in the National Football League. He most certainly is on that Mount Rushmore of defensive players in the National Football League today, and I don't think anybody would dispute that, or anybody that you would take seriously, anybody with a shred of credibility. But then you get to the point where He's talking about holding out, and he wants a new deal, and the organization's dragging their feet, and I'm sure that both sides were way apart, so you didn't know what was going to happen. Now, you start off the year with that blowout victory over the Indianapolis Colts because ultimately Chuck Pagano gifted you a start of Scott Tolzien, so you know how that goes. But then you get Aaron Donald back into the fold, and even with that loss to the Redskins in week number 2, you felt like there was a different buzz, a different vibe about this team. And when they got off to that 5-2 start, you're like, oh, maybe it's time to pay attention to the Rams a little bit. Maybe Jared Goff isn't a bust. Maybe Todd Gurley is that type of back. Maybe Sean McVay is that good. And Aaron Donald is still a freak of nature. And you look at the way this whole season played out. You know, Sean McVay and the job that him and his staff did, and the offensive players buying in and believing in it. You're talking about a team that had 8 games where they scored over 30 points offensively. You had Jared Goff show that he could be the guy. I don't think we're questioning that now. Now it's not a question of if Jared Goff could be a good starter in the NFL or a starter in the National Football League. It is a question of how good is he going to be, and is he going to be a franchise guy or more than a franchise guy? I think that's a valid question now. But the whole narrative has shifted with Jared Goff from year 1 to year 2, and I've been happy to see it. Because coming out of California, I had a first-round grade on him. You know, he was behind Carson Wentz by a little bit, but I still think I had Goff like 7th on my overall big board. So I always felt like he could do it, especially with his accuracy, which translated very, very well to the NFL. And we saw it this year when you got somebody that on the offensive side of the ball that knows what the hell they're doing. It's also reflective in what Todd Gurley did this year. He was a beast. He was a monster. And to me, the MVP of the National Football League. The offensive line improved significantly. No surprise there. And then the trio of Sammy Watkins and Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp were a nice collection of weapons outside for Jared Goff, especially when you throw in what Todd Gurley was able to do in the passing game. You know, Watkins would give you some big plays, even though honestly it felt like Robert Woods brought him more big plays. And Cooper Kupp was the best wide receiver of the 3, and that's a 3rd-round pick out of Eastern Washington. Again, I just want to point out I had a first-round grade on him, but what do I know? And then, of course, you go to the defensive side, and Aaron Donald is Aaron Donald. What more can I really say? I had him graded higher than Jadeveon Clowney in that 2014 draft. I know I've said that 100 times, and I will say it 1,000 more times throughout the rest of his career. You don't like it? Eat shit, okay? I got to eat the bad ones. I most certainly am going to devour the good ones and own every bit of it. But this was a great season for the Los Angeles Rams. 11-5, win the NFC West. You get that home playoff game against the Falcons. And then, unfortunately, with all the good feelings and good vibes in the regular season, you got that home playoff game where, of course, you can't sell out because Los Angeles can really suck as a sports market. Unacceptable. 74,000 people in a venue that seats 90,000. These guys are in the playoffs. This is a young and exciting team. They deserve your support, especially since they spent 4.5+ decades there before. They had previous ties there. There was history there. Shame on Los Angeles, a market of that many millions of people. They can't get 80, 90,000 to show up to the damn Coliseum. What a joke. Los Angeles should do a better job of supporting this team for sure. But then you get to that home playoff game against the Falcons, and they really started off slow, sluggishly. Their defense was a little bit behind the 8 ball. The offense really struggled to get any momentum. And all of a sudden, you're about halfway through the second quarter, and they're down 13-0. The big key was the Falcons were able to slow Todd Gurley down early and often throughout most of the game. He got going as it got into the fourth quarter and such, but by then it was too late, especially when you get a Pharoh Cooper, muffin punts. I mean, those are just the type of mistakes that you weren't getting most of the year, but now you get them at the most inopportune time. And it just wasn't enough. You have the Falcons with all that experience in the playoffs, and the Rams, this was their first rodeo. It doesn't feel like it's going to be their last one, but still a valuable lesson of, there's an entirely different level when you get to playoff football. And it felt like the Rams weren't quite ready for playoff football just yet. So now coming into the offseason, it's time to get ready for playoff football because this is a team with their trajectory, with the coach they have, the quarterback they have, the offense that they have, a defensive Hall of Famer in the future, which he will be in Aaron Donald. The bottom line is you've got to get yourself playoff ready. Good thing for the Rams, they got about $45 million in salary cap space. They're going to have some decisions to make on their roster. Do you keep Tremaine Johnson? Do you keep Sammy Watkins, Connor Barwin, Lamarcus Joyner? Are you going to be able to spend enough money to keep all of them, some of them, keep who you choose. I would expect at this point in time, Barwin probably would come back. I would think either Joyner or Johnson comes back. I'm not sure about both. And I'm unsure about Sammy Watkins, but I might be inclined to believe they might keep him. But it depends on what the market's going to dictate as Sammy Watkins can get. But with all that being said, the number one goal of the program in terms of salary cap is Aaron Donald. I was floored when I saw that Les Snead didn't feel like getting Aaron Donald done in a long-term deal was a priority. It is your number one priority. It is your only priority because you do not want to risk him holding out again heading into 2018. Furthermore, you do not want to risk the potential of franchise tagging this guy and somebody coming in and being willing to part with a first or third round pick or whatever it is, 2 first round picks, especially if they're picking in the middle, the lower portion of round 1. Like this is a team close to contention. Aaron Donald is that special, that 4A defensive player. He is one of those guys you could justify giving up multiple first round picks for because he is that damn good. You do not want to leave this matzo ball hanging over your organization. Find a way, make him the highest paid defensive player in the league. Get the damn deal done. Get it done. It's that simple. This is one of these things, it's like even if he rakes you over the coals, even if he bends you over and spanks you with no lube and says, call me daddy, you look at Aaron Donald and you say, daddy, 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 and you get that damn deal done. There are just certain guys you don't play around. You don't F around. This is one of those guys. You get that done, and then you focus on the draft. Good thing for the Rams now. They've got a first-round pick. They don't have the second-round pick because of the Sammy Watkins deal, but they have their first-round pick, which is something they did not have last year. They got picks in the 3rd, 4th, 5th rounds. I think they got like 3 6-rounders and a 7th-rounder, which is good because they need some help, specifically on the defensive side of the ball. I'm not a huge fan of their linebacking core with like Ogletree and Barron. I feel like they could be upgraded specifically on the inside. But even if you look at Quinn and Barwin, I feel like they could use more depth in terms of edge rushers, in terms of outside linebackers. So I would expect this team to invest quite heavily in their linebacking core in the draft, and it's what they should be doing. They need to, because that defense at times was not great. Wade Phillips does not have the personnel to have a Wade Phillips type of defense at this point, and they need to get there. With losing Janoris Jenkins and trading away an E.J. Gaines, you have a Trumaine Johnson if you even keep him. Even if you do keep him, corner is still a need, and if you allow Trumaine Johnson to leave via free agency, it's going to be an even bigger need. I doubt they would allow him to leave, but you never know what could be going on in this organization's mind. But they really need help in that linebacking core, in that secondary, specifically at the corner position. They've got to get better in the back half of that defense. And then offensively, they probably could use some depth on the offensive line, and then that's pretty much it. I mean, you feel like they're pretty good at receiver now. Tight end, they've got some young options there, and then they've got Gurley at running back, and Goff at quarterback. So this is a team right now, as you look to this offseason, get Aaron Donald's contract done, keep the guys you can keep, and then let's get a couple of guys defensively in the draft that can provide upgrades where you need them, specifically in that linebacking core. Because this is a team right now that is well positioned with Bruce Arians leaving the Cardinals, with the Seahawks seemingly on a steep decline. The Rams have a chance to really establish their dominance in this division for the next several years to come. And this could potentially be the offseason that makes sure that happens.